I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, you talked all about your opening statement about the number of domestic terrorism threats. We've had multiple whistleblowers come to our office and tell us that they're being pressured to categorize cases as domestic terrorist threats that aren't. And I'm just wondering, because it was the opening of your statement, most of your statement, you talked about this new office you filled. Are you juicing the numbers?
So I'm not aware of the references you're making to the whistleblowers. What I can tell you is that the intelligence community has assessed that the threat we face from domestic violent extremism is elevated, and that's consistent with what I see on a daily basis.
Who is Timothy Thibault?
I'm sorry, I don't know that name.
You don't know that name? Mr. Grassley does. Mr. Grassley cited in his letter. Mr. Gates brought him up in his 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Thibault's a guy who suppressed information that was verifiable about Hunter Biden in 2020. You don't know who this individual is?
I'm sorry, I don't know who that is.
You know what's also interesting about this individual? He's the guy that the whistleblowers told us is pressuring them to recategorize the cases as domestic terrorism cases. And you don't know anything about him.
I do not.
All right, well, I guess that maybe stands to reason. I find that interesting. How many more parents has the Department of Justice investigated?
The Justice Department and the FBI investigate individuals who commit acts of violence or threats of violence.
I'm talking in relative
or
to the school board
crimes.
issue. How many more parents have you investigated? We know of 20-some, over 24, because again, we've had other whistleblowers come forward and tell us about that. I mean, the number, it's almost like it's a well-worn trail of FBI agents coming as whistleblowers to our office because so many things that they're concerned about going on at the Justice Department. So we know of over 24. I want to know how many more have you done since we sent that letter 2 months ago to the Justice Department?
So we don't investigate anyone based on their status as a parent or not a parent. We would investigate and prosecute.
You would investigate them based on the threat tag, EDU officials, the designation. How many more than the 20-some we know about already? How many more have been investigated because they have that threat tag associated with their name?
I don't believe that anyone's been investigated because they have a threat tag, and I can't speak to that.
How else are you going to identify them? That was the FBI memo, threat tag on their name, EDU officials, and they've been investigated. And again, we know of over 24 of them.
Yeah. I don't have specific information about that.
All right. You were on the press release when the Attorney General issued his memorandum on October 4th, 2021. The National Security Division was mentioned on this press release that went out that day. Here's what the press release says. According to the Attorney General's memorandum, the Justice Department will launch a series of additional efforts to include the creation of a task force. Has that task force been created?
I believe that it has, yes.
You believe, or has it?
I believe that it has, yes.
Who's on it?
So a number of components across the Justice Department.
Who's on the task force?
A number of components are represented on the task force, from the criminal division to the civil division.
Well, components don't serve on task force. People do. Who are the people on the task force?
A number of representatives of those components serve on the task force.
Do you serve on it?
I am not a member of the task force. I have not been to any meetings. So there are a number of representatives across the department who form that task force.
Who from the NSD is on the task force?
So I don't have any information about who particularly is on the task forse from my division.
This was a big press release. This was the biggest story in the news last fall, and the National Security Division is one of the components on the task force, and you've never been to a task force meeting, and you don't know who from your division is?
Correct.
Are you guys embarrassed about this whole looking into school boards going after moms and dads? Is this an embarrassment? I mean, the National School Board Association has pulled back their letter. They said they apologized for it. They regret that they did it. A bunch of states have pulled out of the organization. I'm just wondering if that's the same attitude you guys now have. Frankly, that'd be good if you did.
I think we take very seriously that anyone who serves in civic life deserves to be safe. And anyone who serves on a school board, on a city council, in any position of public trust, they should not be the subject of threats of violence or violence. And that's the point of this effort, is to work with particularly with
and parents should feel safe that they can speak their mind about their kids'
safe.
education and not be harassed for doing so. You know, we've sent you 103 letters, 500 stream. Then when the Justice Department, key agency in the executive branch, fails to prosecute protesters, ignoring a statute that's directly on point when they're protesting at Supreme Court Justice's home in an effort to intimidate them and influence a decision, a case pending in front of the court. Is that extreme in an effort to intimidate the court?
Yes.
How about the 50 incidents in 10 weeks of crisis pregnancy centers and churches being attacked by left-wing activists? Is that extreme and an effort to intimidate pro-life Americans around the country?
Yes.
Give us a lecture on extreme. You got to be kidding me. Let me ask you this. We noticed today that when you came in, you had a security detail with you. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
And this is the second time you've testified in front of our committee?
It is.
When you testified a few weeks ago, what date? Can you refresh me? I don't remember the date. It was May, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago?
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe I guess it was two.
Post-leak.
Post-leak. So I think it was May, middle of May, you testified. Did you have security detail then?
I did not. I did not have personal security detail at the time.
Is there a reason you have them now then?
There is. I've had to employ both personal and office security because of the threats that I and my colleagues have received, similar to the threats that have been received and, in fact, carried out all across the country with those 50 attacks.
So here's what I wonder. Did you receive those threats after you testified?
Yes.
So that's when they started. You testified as a Republican witness, pro-life witness in front of this committee, then you started getting threats, and as a result, you now have to have security detail. Is that right, Ms.?
That's correct.
So it's not just the pro-life clinics and churches, it's people who have the willingness to come forward and testify in a hearing in front of the United States Congress who also get, I mean, we all know, the left always talks about the threats they get. We all get these threats. It's terrible. Well, I wish no one did. I don't want anyone to have these things. Doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on, we shouldn't have it. But all I know is in 10 weeks, we've had 50 happen to pro-life crisis pregnancy centers and to churches. Ms. Warbelow, do you agree with the leaking of the Dobbs opinion?
I do not, but I do want to clarify that is not the first time that a Supreme Court opinion has been leaked, and we don't know who leaked the opinion or for what purpose.
I don't know. I don't pretend to know who leaked it. I'm just asking if you agree with the leak, because someone on the left seemed to agree with that. Ms. Foster, this concerted effort by the left to engage in an effort to intimidate the court, I think, is dangerous, particularly when you have the legislative branch of government, as evidenced by the actions taken by Speaker Pelosi in holding up that legislation, and the lack of efforts to enforce a statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 1507, by the executive branch, the Justice Department. When you have two branches of government looking to be a part of the left's effort to intimidate a separate and equal branch of government, I find that very troubling. And as someone who understands the Constitution, a constitutional scholar, give me your thoughts on that.
I certainly agree that it's troubling. The legislation that would protect Supreme Court justices should never be held up. No one should be subjected to violence, whether in their home, at their church, at their ministry, or in the womb.
Yeah, well said, well said. And the idea that we had an assassination attempt on a